Recently, AMD is one of the most talked about stocks in finance. There's been lots of news articles about it, it's been spoken about a lot on social media, and with it being 26% down in the last year, a lot of people are saying that this stock is a bargain at the moment. So what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to be exploring AMD and I'm going to be telling you my plan going forwards with this stock. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe. This is going to be a longer video, so sit back and relax. So let's start with AMD. What is AMD? AMD is one of the major semiconductor companies and they have four major sectors. They have the data center, they've got the client, they've got the gaming, and they've got the embedded sectors. These are the main revenues for AMD. So you can see here in more detail, you've got the computer and graphics, the enterprise, embedded, and semi-custom. And these are the different things that it entails. AMD has a market cap of $190 billion. So this is a big market cap company. And it currently has a PE of 103. I'm going to split this video into two parts. The first part, I'm going to be exploring AMD specifically, and I'm going to be going through the financials of AMD. And in the second part, I'm going to be talking about AMD compared to some of its competitors. I'm going to be talking about its moat. And in the third part, I'm going to be talking about what I am going to do personally with AMD and what I think about AMD. So let's get started. So you may recall from one of my earlier videos, this is the general template I use when looking at the financials of the company. This has changed now. I'm going to be adding a few more things, but for simplicity, I'm going to just keep it like this. So as mentioned, 190 billion market cap, quite big. And it's currently trading at $117 with a PE of 104, and it has a 5-year average PE of 157. So currently it does seem undervalued compared to where it's been over the last 5 years. And in terms of debt as well, it's quite low. If I start with the revenue of AMD, you can see over time the revenue generally has been going up. It's in an uptrend. Just in the last couple of years it's stalled out. And if we break down the revenue further, you can see recently there's just four sectors to focus on. So you got the data center, gaming, embedded, and client, as I've showed you before. And you could see clearly the orange one, so the embedded sector, that's a growing sector of theirs, as well as the data center. These are their rapidly growing sectors. You could see from their earnings that compared to the year below, their most recent earnings have been generally much better. They've increased on their gross margins, they've increased in their revenues, they've increased in their operating margins as well, and they've increased their earnings per share as well compared to the year before. So these are all good signs. They've also increased their data center segment, as we just seen right as well. Generally speaking, they're doing well. The gaming segment, they have decreased, so their revenue has gone down year on year, as well as their operating margins. So that's one thing to be aware of. And as well as their embedded segment, that's also decreased in revenue and operating margins as well. So it's not perfect, it's not straight uptrend. There are some challenges in this and we will explore it in this video. Now I'm just going to go through the trading view page. You can see their revenue has been going up. One thing to be aware of is the net income has started to trend down. You could see the margins have also started to trend down. So we're talking last year it was 3% margins. 5% margins before that, 19, 25, and 5. So they used to perform really well. However, the last couple of years have been really challenging. Even if I switch that to the quarterly view, the last quarter did well with 11% margins. And before that, it was less, it was quite low, the margins. Annually, they've hit their estimates for revenue. And they've also hit their quarterly revenues as well, minus Q1 2024. They have enough assets to cover their liabilities, and their free cash flow has started to trend down as well, whilst their debt is also increasing. I'm going to be going through some key ratios with AMD. The first thing I wanted to do was I wanted to just focus more on the net profit margin. So you could see the net profit margin since 2015, it was negative, but it started increasing and they became profitable in 2018. They then had a really good year in 2020, but since then, the net profit margins have been in a consistent downtrend. The other thing I wanted to show you is the EBITDA margin, and you could see that's been in a clear uptrend as well since 2015. However, over the last couple of years, it has been trending down. So that's also something to be aware of. The other thing is the free cash flow per share. That's also started to decrease. In summary so far, AMD, it has got increasing revenues. However, over the last couple of years, it has stalled out and they are starting to get smaller margins, and they are starting to get squeezed in terms of they are losing some of their free cash flow, and they're not making as much money compared to how they were previously. Another thing to be aware of is their earnings per share as well. You could see it started going up and now it's going back down. It's very unpredictable, this company. It's up and down. Looking at their PE ratio over the last 5 years as well, generally speaking, between 2021 to 2022, it's been under 50, their PE ratio. However, over the last few years, it has been going quite parabolic. So in 2023, for example, their PE ratio was 1,200, and currently we're sitting at 103. This shows us that over the last couple of years, AMD is trading cheaper than where it has been. However, if you compare that to even about 2021, 2022, AMD was much cheaper then compared to how it is right now. We can also look at the price to sales ratio. So this is all of the money that they make through sales divided by their market cap. That gives us this price to sale. So you've got the stock price over here. The price to sales ratio is 7.8, but it's not as cheap as what it used to be in 2022, 2023. But generally speaking, it's still on the cheaper side compared to where it's been over the last 5 years. Other things to look at with the financials side of things, you've got the current ratio, which is 2.5, so they can cover any liabilities. Their quick ratio is also really good. Over the last 5 years, they've increased their sales about 38% per year, so this is really, really good. And over the last year, they increased their sales by 10%. And over the last quarter, they increased their sales by 17%. So these are all really good signs so far. What I have an issue with is these three things over here. So first of all, the EPS, the earnings per share. I've mentioned already that this is quite unpredictable. It's down, it goes up, and it goes down. It's hard to predict which direction this is overall. And in terms of sales as well, it's been in a clear uptrend up until 2023, where it has started trending down. The other problem with AMD at the moment is the shares outstanding, the dilution of the shares. So what AMD are doing is, in order to raise capital, they are selling their shares. And unfortunately, investors have been paying a price for this as the stock has been going down. They're not buying back their shares. You can see that lots of insiders are selling their stock as well. So that's the financial side of things. The next thing I want to do is I want to move on to part 2, where I actually talk about some of its competitors and seeing where AMD stands in terms of their moat. So the first thing I want to mention is, with its competitors, you've got two sectors mainly to look at. You've got the GPU sector and you've got the CPU sector. So the main competitor for the CPU sector is Intel, and the main competitor for the GPU side of things is Nvidia. Now, Intel is also another company that's been struggling, where they've had declining sales for years. They've had declining earnings per shares recently as well. Even their sales over the last years have been decreasing, and you can clearly see this when you look at this. This is the CPU market shares of different companies. You could see AMD in red and you can see Intel in blue. So you could clearly see that AMD is eating away from Intel's market share. And eventually, I think this will continue going up as well. You can see the same when you look at the desktop market share, the laptop market share, and the server market shares as well. It's the same story. When it comes to the GPU side of things, unfortunately, AMD is competing against Nvidia. And you could see the difference in terms of the sales. And it goes without me saying that Nvidia has absolutely smashed it the last few years. They have gone parabolic. Their sales have more than doubled just in the last year alone. Last 5 years, they've increased their sales by 46%. The last year alone, they increased their sales by 152%. And over the last quarter alone, they increased their sales by almost twice the amount. So where does that actually leave us in terms of the moat? So for this, I'm going to look at Morningstar, and you could see that they rated AMD as a narrow economic moat. So if you were to read through this, it's a very long piece of text. But just in summary, Morningstar acknowledges that AMD is well positioned in the PCs and the data centers. With it has robust product offerings. However, there are ongoing challenges with AMD. So they have competitors such as Nvidia in the GPU race, and with Windows laptops now using the ARM processors, this it might negatively affect AMD. The other thing is, with gaming consoles, currently they use the AMD chips, such as the new PlayStation Pro. However, when the new models come out, so for example the PlayStation 6, if PlayStation was to, for example, move to Nvidia chips, then this would have a really big effect on AMD. So this is one of those things where we have to wait and see how this plays out. And the other thing is, AMD, they also rate it as having a high uncertainty. They say that Intel, they aim to regain the manufacturing leadership by, within this year. So we'll have to wait and see how that plays out. The cyclical nature of PC market also adds volatility. Let's talk about what the bulls say. So AMD, they've gained market share in the CPU market at the expense of Intel. AMD, they've also partnered with Taiwan Semiconductor to make their chips, whereas Intel, they made the decision to keep things in-house, and that's really negatively affected their business. When it comes to GPU and AI, this offers a massive opportunity, and currently AMD, they lag Nvidia. Nvidia is seen as the leader in this sector, so it's going to be really hard to gain market share from Nvidia. So if we were to go back on here again, you could see that there have been times where Intel did make a comeback and it has negatively affected Nvidia. And this is possible that something like that can happen again, where Intel, it goes up again and the market share for AMD starts coming down. This will negatively affect AMD. And the other thing is, it's going to be hard to compete against Nvidia. All eyes at the moment, they are on Nvidia. So AMD, they're going to have to innovate to try and compete with Nvidia. And recently they've made a chip which competes with Nvidia's chips. However, from what I've read online, it's not been as good as Nvidia. So only time will tell how the differences will be. So these are the risks with AMD, and these are the bull cases with AMD. So now let's talk about the valuation, and let's talk about what my plan is. So this is the weekly chart of AMD. In this video, I said a few times that compared to 2022, 2023, the PE ratio is higher, the price to sales ratio is higher as well. So if we look at that time, AMD was trading around between $60 to $80. And if AMD had been bought at that time, then you'd be looking at almost 100% gain, more than 100% gain. So that was a really good opportunity at the time. If I was to summarize AMD fundamentally, it's a good company. However, it's very unpredictable. That's one of the things I don't like about it. And the second thing is, it's not the market leader in its sector. And the market leader would be something like Nvidia. And with myself personally, I like investing in the market leaders. I don't like uncertainty, and I prefer having money safe. And that's why, for me, as a long hold, Nvidia would be the company that I invest in. As we know, Nvidia at the moment is still really expensive in that regard. And that's not to say not to invest in AMD at all. In fact, when I look at the chart of AMD, I can see a clear support here. And if I was to add some of the moving averages, you could see even right now, we're at the 200-week moving average. So buying here is not a bad price. However, if the price was to come here, then the risk reward, it would be justified, because overall at the moment, AMD is still in a downtrend. You got a high, you got a lower high, you got a lower high, you got a lower low, you got a lower high, you got a lower low. You might get a lower high over here, but then ultimately you might still go to this support. So in terms of how I'm playing this, I normally split my investments into long-term and short-term. In long-term, I only choose some of the best stocks out there. So for example, Nvidia, that's one of the best stocks out there. However, it's still very expensive at the moment. So when the price of Nvidia does come down, that would be in my long-term portfolio. When it comes to short-term, AMD, I think, is a really good investment to have in the short term, because I see that AMD is quite oversold at the moment. And if you were to wait until it goes here and you buy it, and even if it goes to the Morningstar valuation of $160, then that's a really good gain. For completeness, I'm going to just show this table over here. So you could see annually, it's not an amazing company because they're still diluting their shares. However, quarterly they've been doing well, and their narrow economic mode and their high risk nature is the reason that I'm not using it as a long-term investment. And going forward, you could see just in the next year alone, it's poised to grow 25% of its revenue. Whether it actually achieves that or not is one to see, but there's 47 analysts saying that it's going to grow 25%. So usually when that many analysts are predicting something, then most likely it's going to be in that ballpark. And the following year is 23%, and the following year is 19%. So they are poised for a lot of growth, even when you look at the earnings per share. Only time will tell whether they actually achieve these or not. However, it is really interesting at the moment. But for me, it's not going to be a long hold. I am interested in AMD, and when I feel that the price is right for me, so if I'm talking about $100, then that's when I'm going to have a dabble in AMD as a swing trade. One thing I wanted to show is how AMD has performed against its competitors. So here is AMD, you've got Nvidia, Intel, Qualcomm, and the S&P 500. So in the last year alone, the biggest loser was Intel, down almost 60%. Then you got AMD, whereas you got companies such as Nvidia that's gone up 136%. If I was to go over the last 5 years, Intel is the biggest loser. AMD has gone up 130%. However, look at this, compared to Nvidia, Nvidia's up 2000%, and it has outperformed the S&P 500 over the last 5 years as well. And if I was to go on the maximum charts, you could see AMD is underperformed all of these companies in the long run. So that's why for me, it's not a long-term hold. However, as a short-term hold, I think AMD, it will do well. However, at this price, I still do feel it's overvalued. If you found this video useful, please like, subscribe, and if you have any questions, please drop it in the comments. And if you want to share this video with others, I'd really appreciate it as well. Thank you for watching. Thank you.